Hey guys, today we're in the book of Genesis, chapter 37. Today we start one of probably the greatest story in all of Genesis, and that's kind of the beginning story of Joseph. And so we pick up here, Joseph being the 11th son of Jacob, or Israel, as God renamed him. And so we pick up with him that they're living in the promised land. And we see that he is 17 years old in verse 2. And he was a boy with the sons of Bilhah, Zilpah, the father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. We're going to start out the story with Joseph. Even though he's the 11th youngest son, he is like the supervisor of his brothers. We're about to see that he's very favorited. His father, Jacob, loves him and loves him more than any of his other sons. And so here we see that this young brother is bringing a bad report against his older brothers, which if you've had kids, you understand that doesn't really work out well, right? He's kind of being a tattletale. In verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. Not only is he a supervisor, not only is he a tattletale, but he is also favorited among all the other sons. So you can imagine how the 11 other brothers dislike Joseph just because of his place with his father. Not only was he his favorite, but we see he made him a robe of many colors. Now, a lot of people know about this robe, but basically, here's what you need to understand. This robe is kind of saying that he is the prince, or he is the king over them. This is what we would see in past chapters of Genesis, of saying that even though he's the 11th born, he has the birthright. He is above them. We've read in past chapters where the birthright goes to the first, right? Where you would think that Esau would have got it, but he traded it off for a bowl of soup. But now we have the 11th brother, right? So there's 10 other older brothers above him, and the father is giving him this gift of this robe of saying, you will receive the birthright. You are the one that will carry everything through. And because of that, verse 4, his brothers hated him. Now, Joseph had a dream and he wanted to tell his brothers. And what's interesting here is you've probably figured out that maybe at best, Joseph isn't the most thoughtful person, right? He has these dreams. He knows what these dreams mean because his brothers know what these dreams mean, but he keeps wanting to tell his brothers. And the first brother, they're out in a field tying wheat together. It's what it says. He comes in there binding sheaves. They're binding wheat together. And he says, as we're doing this, everybody, all the other sheaves turn and bow down to me. And then that's why we get in verse 8, his brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us? His brothers knew what that dream meant. They knew the interpretation of that dream. And so what happens, verse 8, they hated him even more. Then we go on to verse 9, and he has another dream. And he says that he says the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were all bowing down to me. And now this time he tells his father and his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him. His father was mad over this idea. But notice what it says. It says, shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come down to bow ourselves to you? Now, if you remember 2 chapters ago, we're going to find we saw that that Joseph's mother died. So what does it mean when it says that shall I and your mother bow down? Maybe this is talking about his stepmothers, but in reality, we've seen several times through the book of Genesis that we would just say this is kind of out of chronological order. This happened while Rachel was alive. Okay, and so some things got out of chronological order. They're all true. It's just kind of the events have just been placed in the book in Genesis for us and just slightly out of organization. And so the father knows, right? He says, he rebukes him. But notice verse 11, it says, his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. His father kind of just tucked that in the back of his memory and says, this is interesting. Then story goes on. His brothers went to pasture his father's flock near Shechem. Now, what's interesting is you're going to see that his brothers are the workers and Joseph is the supervisor. His brothers go out in the field and have to tend to the flocks and travel with the flocks and move them on, all the while Joseph is at home in his own bed, in his own house, unless his father needed him to do something. And that's exactly what happens in this story. But notice where they're at. Shechem. We've heard of this place before. This has not been a good place for Israel to be. Genesis chapter 24, but they're in Shechem, and Israel tells Joseph, hey, go check on your brothers, see how they're doing, and bring a report back to me. And so he goes off, he takes off, and he finds out that they're actually in Dothan, which is just about 10 or 15 miles west of Shechem. And he's there. But notice verse 18, it says, they saw him from afar. I wonder how they could do that, because he's wearing a multicolored coat, right? He traveled everywhere with this thing. So they see him and they conspired against him to kill him. Not only did they hate him, not only did they not like his dreams, not only did they not like him, but now they have hatred in their heart. But notice what they says in verse 19. It says, here comes the dreamer. Here comes the dreamer. Not only do they hate them, they mock him, and they say, come now, let us kill him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. They've never liked Joseph. They don't like the favoritism. They don't like that the youngest is the boss. They don't like the youngest has the birthright. But what they ultimately do not like is that Joseph's dreams are implying that they will be less than Joseph, right? So they hate the dreams of Joseph more than the person of Joseph. And so they said, let's kill him so we can make these dreams stop. They're not going to bow down to Joseph if Joseph is dead. But when Reuben heard this, one of the brothers, he rescued them out of their hands, saying, let's not take his life. They wanted to murder him and throw him in a pit. And Reuben says, hey, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in a pit, right? But notice it says in verse 22 that he might rescue himself out. Reuben is trying to outsmart his brothers. Reuben doesn't want to kill him. Doesn't mean that he likes him, but he doesn't want him to kill him. So he says, hey, let's throw him in this pit and not kill him, that he might rescue himself out, that he might get out, right? That or his blood might not be on our hands. And so it's exactly what they did. But notice verse 25. They throw him in a pit. Throw him in a pit in their mind to stay there and to die. And what do? Verse 25, they sit down and they have a meal. They could probably hear the screams and the yells of young Joseph. They don't care. They sit down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites, these are people from Ishmael, right? One of Abraham's sons, right? Ishmael. And so they lived in a place called Midian, which is basically directly east of Jordan, maybe northeast of not Jordan, of Israel, which would be north of Jordan, right? And so They are there. They see these Ishmaelites. We would just call these people today Arabs. They're just traveling Arabs, and they're basically running a road. There's a road that runs down the east side of the Jordan, and they're going to run down through Midian, down through Edom or modern day Jordan, and then skirt right across the Sinai Peninsula, right into Egypt. They're just running this highway. They're traders. That's what they're doing. They're the semi. They're the caravan that's bringing the goods to sell into Egypt so they can have money that they may bring back home up north. And so they're doing all this, and they say, "Come, let's sell him. If we're gonna have to deal with Dad's dramatics of his favorite son dying, we might as well make some money on this, right? So let's sell him. Let's make him some money." But what do they sell him for? Verse 28. They sell him for 20 pieces of silver, 20 shekels of silver. Does that remind you of something? It's interesting. And so they took Joseph to Egypt. And when Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes, which is a sign of mourning, of anger, of horror, because this was not Reuben's plan. Reuben wanted him to be in the pit and escape and eventually come home, but now he is gone. And so Reuben is in mourning. And they sent the robe of many colors brought to their father, and they tell him, "Please identify this is your son's robe." Now, this is just showing you the cruelty of the brothers. Not only did they do all this to Joseph, but now they're being cruel to their father. They know this is his coat. They know that probably nobody else has a coat like this. And so they dip it in goat's blood and they bring this multicolored coat that's been ripped apart, covered in blood, dried blood, and they come back and say, "Hey, Dad, is this the coat you gave to Joseph?" Of course they know, right? They're kind of digging that dagger into their own father's heart. And we see that Jacob tore his garment, much like Reuben did, that he was in horror and mourning. He put sackcloth on, and all of his sons and his daughters came up and it says, mourned him or comforted him, which means they pretend comforted. They knew what happened, but they're just, "Oh, we're going to miss him too." But his dad said, "No way, leave me alone. I will mourn until the day that I will die." And the last verse tells us that the Ishmaelites of Midian took him down to Egypt and they sold him into the house of a guy named Potiphar. And we'll pick up that story in a couple chapters. Hope that makes sense. Oh, we would say, where's Jesus in this, right? Where is Jesus in this? Let's think about this, that a man was beaten and a man was trying to be murdered and killed, eventually sold by 20 pieces of silver because the people did not like the plans of that person. It's the same as Jesus. Jesus was beaten for the plans of God. That would come and to bring them together. And mankind did not like that. And so they beat him and sold him for 20 pieces of silver and tried to get rid of him so that the plans would not be fulfilled. But we know that God's plans do not stop because of man's hands, right? God is above all. And so Joseph is a picture that says no matter what man does, God's plan continues on for Joseph and for Jesus. Hope that makes sense. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter 38. God bless.